So we're back in the studio this week with Byron.
Hey,
how you doing?
I'm good.
How's your week been?
Hectic. To be honest.
Hectic. Yeah,
Wow.
you were coming in to a screeching halt to the front door today, like.
Yeah, just a combination of university, work, life, work kind of things all coming together.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. I mean, it's busy, but I'd rather be busy than not.
Yeah, I think so. I'm liking the weather finding out.
Yeah, today was actually quite nice. Yesterday was nice too.
Yeah.
I actually got out and did something. I actually went for a walk and I was like, I haven't done this in so long.
I know.
And now I'm really tired because
there was that
so long.
There was that fear of like going walking and being washed down the road or something.
Yeah. Or getting like having like a hill fall down on top of you.
Yeah.
Oh, where's Wellington?
Standing on a rubbish tin lid and just like floating on by maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're in the house today and we're talking to Byron about this amazing piece of work that you're doing, your PhD. So you've sort of put your feelers out a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but I think it's such a topical issue and it's such an important issue, housing. But go over again, like what your thesis is about and what you're trying to achieve with it. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, in a nutshell, it's understanding experiences of racism amongst Wellington's African rental population.
Right.
So, I mean, that's kind of the working title of it, but in a broader sense, it's looking at racism as it functions within the rental sector in generally, and then how it functions in the housing sector. But it's doing it through experiences, but it's trying to understand how racism how racism functions as like a system within that sector, but also how that system then has expressions of racism through, behaviors, internalizations, those kind of stuff.
Okay, explain that a little bit.
So we've got three working ways to look at racism in the thesis. So it's institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Okay, yeah. And that's the way, for now at least, we'll look at those ways that racism functions. So if you look at a housing system itself, or a political system, there are institutional functions, right? The way things are kind of designed to function in a certain way. And because of our New Zealand's colonial history around the world, there tends to be ways racism gets kind of embedded into that system, whether people know it or not.
Right.
And that's one of the ways that we're trying to uncover and try to understand what is this. Does institutional racism exist within the housing sector? I have opinions about that, so many other people do as well. If it does, what does that look like? Yeah. What are the examples? How does that come out through people's experiences? And then secondly, you've got because I would say that racism is more, it's a system, which then expresses itself through the institutions. And then out of that comes interpersonal experiences, whether that be someone calling you an N-word or someone not giving you a job, those kind of things. Yeah. So I find those things to be more expressions of the system. Yeah. So that's broadly the institutional way to understand racism, or, there's a lot more to talk about with that. Yeah. You go a lot deeper.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper.
With institutional racism.
Yeah, with institutional racism. I mean, me personally, I feel like maybe I've just experienced it for such a long time that interpersonal racism doesn't really bother me. I'm more concerned about institutional than interpersonal. Yeah. Like, if somebody, thinks of me as the N-word or less than or whatever, and I don't get a job or I can't get a house or it affects my life, then, I'm upset. But if you're just calling me the N-word and, you're just another person on the street, I don't, it's like it doesn't have that, it doesn't land the same way. Yeah. I mean, I agree. For me personally, I'm sure the difficult thing is I think there are people out there who will experience interpersonal racism and take it, and there'll be a lot more repercussions for them, mental health wise, etc. For myself, I don't like interpersonal racism, but I can deal with it. Yeah. Whatever. If you don't think much of me, I don't really care. Yeah. That's about it. But I do agree heavily in terms of the institutional, because at the end of the day, if due to racism being embedded into the system, you can't climb the social ladder, you can't climb the political ladder, you can't gain any political power. If we look heavily at people who are disadvantaged in this country, they tend not to be white.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
There's definitely a theme behind that, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it goes right from, you know, the way the government structure occurs, and it goes all the way down to, well, actually the people in power right now, or the CEOs tend to be white males, you know, and they'll kind of go, oh, that guy looks pretty good. They have a bias toward their white male. They pick other white males up as they go along.
Yeah.
The next CEO tends to be white.
Yeah.
Next CEO is white again.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so you get those kind of, the way the government itself functions, which then creates barriers for certain groups of people to go through. But even in terms of housing as well, you know, who gets the funding, who gets the resources, who lives in those really, really nice areas that have good housing, you know?
I was just thinking, I need to sort of like amend, I need to amend what I just said before, because I think it's not that I don't care if people call me the N, that's not it. I think that when I was in Tanzania, I never had that experience, right? But when you've had that experience all of your life, you get a bit more thick-skinned.
You become quite numb to it, and you're like, oh,
you become thick-skinned.
Say what you want.
It's not that you're internalizing it, because, you know, like if somebody is going to call you names, and, you know, abuse you like that, you're going to do something about it. But I think what I'm trying to say is that there's bigger fights than interpersonal, but I know how people can get, if they're fresh, you know, in Tanzania, I never got called any derogatory names by any, you know, everybody was black. So like, no one was actually being racist to people. And that was like my first time that I was around in a space where, racism doesn't exist here. Or it doesn't exist in the ways that we're used to it in New Zealand, right? So it probably does, but it's probably called tribalism, or it's called classism, some other mechanisms, So that was different. So I'm not dismissing interpersonal racism. I know like how people are so sensitive to it. I'm just not there anymore. I would have been there like in my 20s, teenage years.
And that's very much what I was like. Like I went through teenage years of having a lot of, you know, interpersonal, and mostly disguised as jokes. New Zealand.
Oh, I hate those jokes.
But then as I got older, I was like, I don't really care if you think you're better than me. I don't want to be living in poverty. Like that's the bigger thing.
That's the main thing.
You know, in terms of institutional racism, there are repercussions for people, and they tend to be through how your life looks like, what your life trajectory, you know what I mean? Like where you can and can't go, what jobs you can end up, what kind of education you can get. Racism's embedded into that as well. You know, and that I think I agree with you is much, I wouldn't say more important, but there's it's a lot more impactful on people's lives. You know? Like if I, you know, when immigrants arrive in places, and they come, they don't have any institutional wealth or any wealth behind them. It's very difficult to build that when you haven't got those generations of assistance behind you.
I think, you know, my experience of it was heavy policing in certain areas that were predominantly people of colour. Or heavier sentences, or heavier fining, or heavier treatment on people of colour. That's where I first experienced like the whole thing of institutional, but even prior to that, it actually was real estate. It actually was real estate. Like when I was looking for housing, and I had spent a period of time of being homeless, and you couldn't get past go to get into. I actually had to find a white friend. And she was from Dunedin. I can't remember her name. But, you know, and basically she got a place somewhere, and I just moved in with her. That was the only way I could get into housing.
And what you're explaining is hugely institutional racism, in the sense that because property is so integral to gaining any kind of wealth in most nations in the world, especially Western and settler colonial nations. And if you're denied opportunity to get housing or get property, it's so difficult to develop wealth without those, especially if you're renting in the circumstance now, right? Like, okay, cool, I can then, you know, the idea oftentimes, you know, the trajectory people place in New Zealand society is you get a house in your 20s or whatever.
Do you?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like the New Zealand dream of, you know, that was expressed in the 1950s, you know, post-war New Zealand.
Post-war New Zealand,
You know, get an education, get a partner, you know, buy a house, someone works, and then once you get old enough, you buy a second property, which then becomes your retirement fund.
No, you're absolutely right.
Many people can't do that. You know, so if I'm in a situation where I can't gain access to property or to a house, your opportunity to gain wealth is so much lower. And that tends to be people who are not white, in those. So, that in itself, people can justify that being like, that's just the way the system works. It's like, but the system's very pointed towards certain people to help and certain people to push down. So that institutional conversation is quite, it's a difficult conversation to have, but there are clear examples of it. And as you just explained with your housing experience, that's a clear example of that,
And then again, I mean, being a single parent since I was 21, I had no access to credit.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't give you, the bank would not give you a loan. The bank would not give you credit because you were a single mum.
Yeah.
And so therefore, like you know, and I don't know whether that was the excuses they told me. I don't know if it was the same for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean that's part of it too, right? Like you walk away going like, okay, you can understand why it's been justified along those economic means, but you don't know for sure if it was racism or not.
No.
You're kind of like, did they just not like me? Is that
exactly?
What it was? Like,
and then like you become a student who are traditionally the poorest people in New Zealand next to single mothers, and you can get access to loans. Because the whole idea is that you're supposed to go onto a job that often never eventuates.
It's a whole thing, like I think institutional racism is it's become so entrenched that it's just the norm now. You know what I mean? Like it just is what it is.
Yeah.
And then there becomes often this justification as to why people go their way. Like statistics is quite a difficult conversation to have when it comes to ethnicity and race and those things. People go, oh look, people are failing in schools tend to be Māori, and you can gain whatever conclusion you want from that. You can go, oh, it's because they're lazy and they don't work hard. It's like, well, that's not at all the case. Institutional racism. So you get into this.
I think we need to just pointedly ask the question: are you being racist? Like, It's a more direct answer.
Because everyone wants to kind of talk around this issue and like, oh, racist.
Don't use the R word.
That's exactly what that is. And I mean, it's. As I read through the literature, it's a difficult topic to talk about, generally speaking. That's why I think this radio show is so good for that. But it's also a very difficult thing to explain because people go, but that's not racism. That's just capitalism. It's like, but capitalism has racism embedded within it. Where did the system come from? You ask those kind of questions, which is what we're doing through this research, asking those questions. So the idea of institutional racism. The literature will tell us, but also through experiences, you can start to paint a picture of, wow, these people did exactly the same thing as, that the New Zealand dream we were told to do and didn't get the same outcome. You can start picking apart, why does this occur? And you start painting a picture to go, okay, maybe racism might play a factor within this as well, so.
I know when we were in Western Australia, that was the first time I'd seen for such a long time 18 and 19-year-olds actually buying their first home.
Wow.
And I hadn't seen that since the 70s. Like my cousin, she bought her home in Wanganui, and she would have been in her early 20s.
Yeah.
And that was all supported, like her dad, and whatnot. And I mean, there is a lot of that, like families supporting families to get into homes. But if you're a migrant from another country, you don't necessarily have those familial links. In New Zealand, do you?
Like generational wealth is huge in terms of getting somewhere. The way we traditionally understand getting somewhere in life. Like even just down to attitudes around. I mean, the way I think about it is kind of in two ways. It's like the attitude you develop around education or working or being a business person within those circles is quite different from someone who didn't have those opportunities at all or didn't see that in their family at all. The second one is you've got a safety net. Like if I'm trying to become a business person and I've got a father or uncles or things who have money who can back me up.
Money and knowledge.
Exactly. It's very if I do fail, I've got people to bail me out. That's the thing. People who will try to come from very little, if they fail, that's kind of it. It's very difficult to have to if you haven't got someone there to back you up, haven't got a financial safety net, it's very difficult once you fail in those circumstances. But that's also where I would very much encourage, like, we need a a policy-based social network, or not network, safety net, you know, where I can go get a loan that isn't going to put me into mad debt with high interest rates moving forward. If I don't have that financial backing from my family, I should be able to go to, you know, a government agency and go, hey, I've got a really good idea for a business, and get a loan without having to pay, you know, insane amounts of interest for the rest of your life over that, you know?
Well, the amount of rent we pay these days, we're basically people paying rent or paying off people's mortgages. So I know there used to be a scheme, rent to buy.
Yeah.
You got into your house and your rent actually was your mortgage. What you paid in rent each week is actually your mortgage. I don't see why that can't be done again. What do you think of that policy? Like, would something like what you're doing right now with this, you know, you're looking for solutions, right? Or you're looking for different ways of looking at the problem of renting and housing and getting away around the, you know, the neo-capitalist things that actually marginalise people within that space. Like, would that be something that you would advocate? Because if you're going to pay $600 a week in rent, you may as well put that on a house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the issue that people are having, is that they can't save for a house because they're paying someone else's mortgage through rent. You know, what's really interesting about the question is that there are many models that we can actually look back toward, which are actually quite effective and actually quite helpful, like the pay to rent scheme. But even in New Zealand itself, prior to the 1990s, home ownership was quite high, and part of that was because you could go and get a loan from the government that wasn't absolutely insane. You know, and the idea was So I think at that point the government was this. This is all literature that I've read, and it's all.
Was it Muldoon's government?
I don't remember when. But it was because, you know, in many places around the world, many Western nations, following World War II, housing was in a horrible state. So was the economy and the governments themselves. So they tended to go to a much more kind of social welfare Keynesian approach to just policy.
That's how they built Lower Hutt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So all these things, you know, there's models that we can point toward in the past that are actually quite helpful for people, but it was mostly through the changes, the neoliberal changes, which put everything into a market-based economy, which then became the issue. And part of that was people who were renting prior to the 90s. They had the income-related rental subsidy that 25% was the max that people could pay, and this was again social housing. And then once the kind of market-based policies came into power, it meant that the people who were living in social housing actually got the opportunity to buy their property, which again wasn't a bad thing, you know. But the issue was that market rent got introduced. So all the rental, the amount you paid for rent was dependent on the fluctuations of the market itself. So there were very few protections for people. Now, that's what I would advocate first, is to actually just put some more regulations into it first and foremost. So that kind of what what people are advocating for the IRS anyway, is to put regulations and limits on how high people's rent can go, because it's based in the market, basically. Right,
and the market's insane. Like, especially if you're on fixed income or minimum wage. I mean, working 70 to 80 hours a week is not living a life. It's becoming a slave to somebody else's mortgage, right? Essentially. Or I don't know if in Wellington City Council they actually own all their properties outright. But I don't understand why if they do own their properties outright, why are we following a market? Because it's already paid. So really it should be, like, I don't know if it is paid or not, but I mean, for sure either. So I mean, why would we be paying more than the 25%, which is a reasonable amount that people should pay for rent?
And I guess it comes back to thinking about what are the principles of your policy. What's shaping your policy? You know, and a lot of time it's I think we've spoken about this before. It's profit. You know, especially in the private rental sector, it's profit. The idea is for if you own a second property, presumably at least, in terms of renting that property out, the policy is based around these people making profit. It's not about housing people. You know? And that was the difficulty. Well, the difficulty I find with putting things into the market is that once you put it to the market, you kind of just going hands off. free for all.
Yeah.
You got to make money, man. Go make money.
Yeah.
Kind of
Any way you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that perhaps at the time putting it to the market wasn't a terrible idea. But the problem with the market is that it's so temperamental and so unpredictable that if prices rise, that's just what you have to do. Supply and demand. There's not enough houses at the moment, so the prices go through the roof.
Sorry, we can't think about being reasonable. We've just got to put the prices up.
Yeah, whether
you can afford them or not.
Yeah, and that's just because other people justify, that's just how the market works. That's just how capitalism works. Yeah. And that's why I think the beginning would just to put regulations on.
Yeah. Or even like you said, like with talking about the whole way that we look at housing is to start looking at it differently.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and start, because I think Vienna has a very interesting rental. I don't know the details of it. There's different countries that do rent in different kind of ways, as well as home ownership. Like I think I know Singapore does home ownership in quite a different way. Singapore has their own issues with politics and economics and all those things anyway.
Singapore.
I think it's Singapore. I'm not 100% sure.
Is Singapore the country that has those multi-story tower blocks that are like 100 levels high? Is that Singapore?
I mean, it's possible. So, I mean, I don't know if it's Singapore itself, but I know that, there are different models that people do home ownership. So the government itself is actually quite hands-on with that. It's still a capitalist economy, but it's very hands-on with providing home ownership.
So it's made a conscious decision that housing is actually something everybody needs.
Yeah, and then you get a place like Germany that have quite their rents are quite low, so it's very affordable rent, and there's quite a lot of autonomy for the tenants themselves. It's very difficult to kick a tenant out. Yeah. Obviously, there can come issues with that too, but the protections are around, the regulations around safeguarding the tenant more so than the landlord. Yeah. And I know Vienna again has a different system too. And this is part of what I'm saying is that there are other systems out there that we can point toward and say actually this can be useful. The specific area matters and the specific histories matter as well. But you can amend things. Humans are creative. We're creative. We can come up with different ways that we can function. Yeah. But the guiding principle for Vienna's housing, or rental housing at least, is that housing is a human right. Yeah. So human rights come before property rights. That's the point. But when you put everything to the market economy, things become about property rights over human rights.
Exactly.
And exploitation is very easy to have in that space as well. Then.
I mean, even our Human Rights Commission has basically come out and said housing is a human right. But we're talking to ministers that are talking about it as, it's a commodity.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're thinking about it in two different ways, how do you come together? I mean, sooner or later, you've got to address the elephant in the room that we're actually thinking about housing in two totally different ways.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the difficulty when people often say, I'm sure you've heard this before, people say, I'm socially liberal, like I'm liberal on social issues, but I'm fiscally conservative. Right. It's like, well, those things don't really work together. Because if you think, hey, let's say, I think in the United States, integration was quite a, big buzzword for a while of, a very segregated neighborhood. People are like, I think integration is a good idea, people interacting with one another, but they support no welfare policies at all to aid black communities to get closer in wealth to white communities. Right. So it's like, I believe that we should all be together and kumbaya and shake hands and we're all one people, but all the economic policies which would enable that, they say no, but I'm economically conservative. So it's like, well, that's the same thing coming at housing again, where it's like, it's a human right, but we're still keeping in the market economy. Those things, they fundamentally can't work together. Exactly. Especially if people are struggling economically just to get by. Yeah. So...
I mean, it's almost like, I don't know, like what we were talking earlier today, it's like people are not prepared to address the greed factor. Yeah. And that, that it's in, like, if you've got a house and you're invested in another house and you're renting it out, it's like, yay, awesome. But
cool, you've done well. Like, cool,
you've done well, great. But if people can't afford to rent it, and then there's a problem that needs to be addressed about housing.
Yeah, but also, I mean, a lot of that wealth is off the back of other people's struggle. You know what I mean? Like, if I've got a second property and I'm renting it out at a really high market rate, like it's in my interest to hope that the market stays very high. Yeah. And then these people are struggling to pay me that rent, I'm getting rich off their struggle. Yeah. And again, that's like it's more of a fundamental issue to how do we want our society to be to be run. Like I mean, I see housing as very much an expression of broader issues in society, right? And some of that is that everything is based in the economy. Everything's about making money. Everything's about making profit. And then that population becomes smaller and smaller who can really access that profit and really make the most of it. You know, like I don't really have an issue with people doing well in businesses and people going, hey, look, I'm doing this well for me. I'm working with the community. I'm actually making money. Cool, great, kudos. Do your thing. Make your money, man. But my issue is once it comes into the issue of I'm using this to exploit other people. Then we have to have a question about what system we really want or what kind of society we want to live in. You know? And I know what kind of society I want to live in, and that's much more of a much more equitable, egalitarian society. But part of that too is that a lot of the reasons why people don't see this as problematic is because people go, well, that's just how the system works. That's just what it is.
But systems are created. Like we invent the system. We can change them. Rules. Like this is why I get so annoyed when people say this is policy or this is written into an act when it's like. Well, somebody had to write it, so unwrite it. You know, that's all there is to it. It shouldn't be such a. But you know, like half the time you realise, well, it's not really that the ink is on the paper. It's just lack of will. They don't really want to do anything about it. And
there's always some complication. And I understand policy writing is complicated, but it depends. What are your principles? What's your guiding factor behind writing this policy in the first place? And I think one of the issues we come across is that people tend to understand, you know, policy or our economic system or the way we understand politics as it's like gravity. People say it's just natural law. It's like, no, we've created these things. We've created how these things function, and we can change them. You know, but I do think it's very difficult when people are just trying to get by to be politically and economically radical. It's very difficult to be because. Hey man, if I go out on the street and say we need better A, B, and C, but that means I might lose my job, I'm staying at work today. I'm not losing my job. That means my money's gone. It means my my food's gone, my housing, my roof over my head. So it becomes so difficult in that circumstance to really have those. It's easier to accept the system. I think is what I'm trying to say. Is that when you've got something to lose within the system itself, it's very easy just to go, I'm doing all right for myself. I'll just leave it there. Like I'm cool with that.
So, okay, so you're looking at African people that are in the rental market and their experiences in the rental market with the kind of viewpoint on racism experienced in the rental market.
In a specific point, yes, but general experiences of the rental market itself. I'm interested in. So interested in people who are in social housing, whether that be through the council or Aotearoa, but also people who live in the private rental sector as well. So and it's just understanding the way people experience that broad system. So my job is to read about the system itself, get the background of it, and then understand what experiences people are having within the system. Then racism will come out of that too. I'm sure it will. I'm sure people would say.
And this is all under that Wero. Are they doing a lot of different things, looking at a lot of different institutional sort of areas?
Yeah, they've got a website now. The website's up and running, which I might just link to you, and then you can.
I can put it on the page.
Yeah, people are interested in looking at it. I'm not 100% sure what other streams are there. I'm in the housing one. Well, it's geography. For the most part, everyone's been pretty happy that it's being done. First of all, a research looking at racism in housing. Generally speaking, not specifically at Africans in rent. They're very, very happy that it's that someone's doing that in this space. But also, people have all expressed to me, this is an issue.
It's a massive issue.
But they say it's an issue that isn't really spoken about. I think that's the biggest thing that I've come across so far is that people tell me, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And they'll tell me experiences of themselves or people that they know, and they'll go, but the issue is we're not having this conversation. People aren't talking about racism as an issue within their housing experiences. They kind of go, oh, it was bad. But again, that's part of, in my mind, is part of the system can be so dominating that's what people tend to pay attention to because it's like, oh my gosh, this, the system of housing that we live in the first place is so expensive, the quality isn't great, So racism kind of gets put on the back burner because of that. So I really want to emphasize a lot of those stories as well. Yeah,
and also that whole thing of just having to meet that crazy rent every week, you don't have time to think about.
Affordability is huge.
Yeah. So so what's come up in your research so far? Like, what are the things that first of all, has there been any research into Africans in the rental market at all done anywhere? And even if it's not even if it's not New Zealand, have you looked at Australia and England, and if there's any similarities or anything like that?
There are similarities between places like the US or Canada, Australia, the UK, and that's all because, again, it's very much based around the market economy.
Right.
Housing rent is very neoliberal in its function.
Yeah.
And a lot of that occurred very similar to New Zealand in the sense that post World War II, the government put a very hands-on approach to building houses for people, getting people into housing, and providing good quality housing for people at that time.
Yeah.
But the 1990s fundamentally changed the approach, and that was very much everything goes to the market economy.
Yeah.
And when subsequent crashes happen, because that's just what a capitalist economy does. Supply demand becomes an issue, prices go through the roof, and there's no one there to really regulate that for people. So
do you think that maybe that's why there's a bit of a go slow with this building state houses at the moment, because they don't want prices to fall even further, because you always have that, if there's demand, the prices stay high.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing.
I'm always looking for the conspiracy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, being a sociologist, you always have to walk very neatly through that border of being a conspiracy theorist versus being a person who's actually got evidence to back this stuff up. You got an idea, but you spend hours finding evidence. Not that you approach it with the idea first, but you just read and you kind of go, there's patterns going on here. But I think there's when I think about that, that could be a factor. Very hard to say. But at the same time, the fact that there's a housing shortage, which again keeps prices very high, it means that builders currently have lots of work. People who are in the construction sector have a lot of work.
Like, I didn't see so many cranes in the air as when we were flying out of Sydney.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In 2015. It was like they were having the construction boom of the century. Yeah. Everywhere you looked was cranes. And nothing was getting finished, if you know what I mean. They even had cranes falling into things. So,
but I mean, I guess coming back to our conversation around, the systems that we have and are they effective or not. I mean, it's kind of an issue in terms of people want to provide housing for people. But the issue is, say if I'm a builder and I provide, obviously there will still be jobs for builders, but say if I provide, we the building and construction industry provides enough house for everyone in New Zealand for the next 50 years. Does that mean I'm now out of a job? It's those kind of questions you begin to ask. So it's like, it's, and I guess the functioning of an economy is that money's changing hands, things are happening, things are being built, all those kind of things. But if you solve the issues, like the social issues of housing or whatever, or retrofitting every single building in the country that makes it carbon neutral for the next, to meet the 2050 goals, all these really, really good goals that we have in mind, if we still have an economy that is, if you have to have a well-paying job just to survive in the economy, if we solve all these issues, what happens to those people who solve the issues? They have work now. So you run into these issues of the system itself is heavily reliant on work, money changing hands. Like I think following the Christchurch earthquakes, New Zealand's GDP went quite high, and part of that was because a city had been flattened, but it meant lots of work went into the area. So it's like, well, actually the GDP is going up, which makes it look really good. But a city was flattened because of an earthquake. So it is, what I mean? Like, you've got this really strange way that things are measured in our society based on the economy. There's all these major issues. And I really think, and I'm not saying, again, I'd love for there to be a radical overhaul of the system, but I don't think we have to fundamentally change the system. We just need to change the way we approach it and change some of the principles, I think.
I think regulation is probably the easiest, the most simplest. Stop those rents going above 25%. Like, it's just crazy, but...
Yeah, I think my brother sent me a headline.
People might like that.
My brother sent me a headline to, I think it was, I don't know where it was somewhere, might have been in the UK. And it was just saying that, I think the government had suggested that they put some regulation on how high people can raise the rent because of the cost of living crisis. Right. So I mean, there are ways. Governments are doing those policies. They go and actually things are going pretty bad right now. Let's put a cap on that. Like when petrol got really high, the government was like, they were able to step in. There are things that we can do. But again, it comes down to. You've also got the political issue of. People very much see national as the fiscally responsible political party, which is
Don't forget they created the housing crisis in the first place, people.
Very questionable. But the principle is that most politicians want re-election. So if the Labour government came in and said, actually, we're going to put a lot of regulations on the whole idea of even introducing more tax to people has been like, oh, you can't do that, socialism, no, this is horrible. So
what's wrong with socialism?
It's been demonized.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really strange how it's demonized, and half of the people who actually say we're anti-socialist, they don't even know what it is.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I was watching a video on I quite like shoes. That's one of my things.
Yeah, you can't like shoes if you're a socialist. Don't get us a sneakerhead.
And this one person this person who was kind of talking about a pair of shoes explained that the company itself was employee run. It was employee run, and the profits went back to the employees. Okay. He's like, I think that's quite cool. And I was like, he just described socialism. Yeah. That's what he just did without knowing it.
Yeah. So libraries and affordable swimming pools. Yeah. And ambulances and fire engines. Yeah. That's socialism, folks. Yeah.
Yeah. If everything was private and you had to afford all the things by yourself, like, we'd be...
Imagine if your house was burning down and then you had to pay the guy, you had to ring the guy and then you had to pay the guy and you didn't pay him enough, your house burnt down.
Yeah, so like there's...
That'd be capitalism.
Yeah, and part of the issue is that the way that people have understood socialism or communism has always been in the name of the Soviet Union. Yeah.
And it's so stupid, like looking at those things just through those lenses, because you've got to take into account the culture, the environment, and all these other things.
But also, even Soviet Russia just called itself communist. Yeah. It was more state capitalism than anything else. Yeah. That's pretty much what it was. It was like, oh, you guys do all the work, we as the state then take the money for ourselves. It's like, well, then they put it into an economy. It's like, well, that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about socialism. Yeah. We talk about
I think New Zealand was essentially socialist. I don't know, like people have sort of given it different names, but I mean, like when you went to the supermarket and there's only like 2 flavors of yogurt and you can only buy either a refrigerator by Calvinator or Fisher and Paykel, and those are the only options you've got. That's pretty much socialism too.
But even now, when people talk about capitalism as in its ability to create competition, which then creates better products. Half of these companies just have monopolies. Yeah. Like social media is a very big thing. Yeah. Facebook pretty much owns everything. Yeah. Like there are different ways.
Is it called Meta now?
Yeah, Metaverse or something. Yeah. And I mean that's what I find quite interesting when people say, oh, this is so horrible. Oh, under capitalism we get more options, we get more competition, which is good, which isn't a bad thing per se. But when people make that argument, dude, how many people have iPhones here? Yeah. There's 2 major industries there that create this. Facebook's everywhere. Facebook owns just about everything. WhatsApp.
So it's socialism for the rich.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And everybody else has got to scrap and beat each other up.
And I mean I don't know. That's I don't want to get too much into this political conversation because that's how you create enemies.
Yeah. You're the one that has to get a PhD. I'm here with Byron, and he's telling us about this research that he's doing. Through the Wero project, and wanting to specifically speak with African people who rent, or people of African heritage who rent, in and around the Wellington. So tell us a little bit more about how you want to approach that. What do you think is going to be the best way?
Well, I mean, at the moment for the research, I'm just getting more involved with the community and getting to know people, because trust to me is a big thing. I want people to trust me and trust that the research is aimed at telling their voices in a very dignified way. That's what I'm trying to do. Like, I don't want people to go, oh, that's what he wants to do, but he's not. I am definitely aiming to do that. Yeah.
I think one thing I really want to make really clear here is that you're so full of integrity about what you're full of integrity about what it is you're actually doing. It's about because you want to make a change, you want to make a difference. Some people would go about this and all they're thinking about is what their reward would be at the other end. But I've been quite struck by the fact that you're quite passionate about making a difference.
Thank you. But I mean, PhDs don't make any money. I mean, obviously the goal is to get a PhD and make money, move forward. But at the end of the day, the aim for me is to make a difference and to make a change. That to me is huge.
Yeah.
You know, I've spoken about my own experiences here before, and I've said to you before, if I had a community around me and behind me that I could actually talk to and be African with, and you know, and that's kind of what I want to do for other people.
Yeah.
If in any way that I can, and this has been a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
For myself. So come back to the research. The aim is to tell people stories, because you asked me earlier about research overseas. There is research done in racism in housing, but many of them are not qualitative in the sense that they're not telling people stories. Right. You know, a lot of it is audit studies, which again have their place in terms of, like, you know, for example, two people will hand in the same application for an apartment. Same qualifications, everything, but someone will have like a foreign sounding name and then a native sounding name. Sure. You know, and oftentimes it's the foreigners that don't get the apartments. You know, so that's a really good way to understand racism too. But not many studies go out there and tell people stories. That's what I want to do. I want to tell people stories. And then, you know, my part is to read and understand the system itself, and then tell people stories about how that system then affects them and how they exist within that. What do they experience? How do they talk about racism? How do they understand racism? And how does racism function for them within the system? Yeah,
because I think in this day and age, when people sort of say, "Oh, that's just the system," right? I think that's a cop out. Like, you know, like the system's being created, and you know, if the effects of racism on people is traumatic, and that being the system means that the system is broken and the system needs to be fixed, because basically the system is traumatizing people.
Yeah, and I mean the system works for some people more than it does others. Yeah. And if you're part of a group that is constantly getting beaten down by the system, well, then something needs to change. Yeah. You know, that's very much how I feel about it.
I mean, we don't go around and actually say, going around beating people up and knocking them down and bullying them is actually the way that we should live our lives. Yeah. Right? But, okay, the system does that, and then it's all okay. No. We don't do that.
It's this, it is what it is attitude. And like I say that a lot, you know, sometimes it makes sense. It is what it is. We just live our lives. Yeah. But when it comes to a political and economic and you know, a system that has structures and institutions that then have these issues, you know, there should be some advocacy to make some change. And like we said, even if it starts with regulation, that's a good step in the right direction. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what I'm aiming to do with the study is to do interviews. I'd love to interview people and chat to people. The aim is to get 30 people in total. The aim was to do interviews and focus groups, but I'm very aware that people are quite time poor. You know, people have so many things going on. You've got family life, you've got work, you've got hours that you're working.
And people are more stressed now. They think they need more sleep. I know I do.
Oh, yeah. Sleep is one of the most underrated superpowers humans have.
Exactly. Like, I sort of get to the end of the week, and I always say this, by the time I finish the show, I'm just crawling back to bed. I'm like swimming through the air, floating back to my bed where it's nice and warm.
But we just have this, you know, people have to survive in the system, right?
I know.
We're surviving, so it's just work, earn money.
And I know
money
that
again goes to rent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, the time that we spent in Australia and there you don't have any safety nets as Kiwis. That was all people did. It was all about what are you doing for a living? How much are you earning? Are you making money?
Yeah, and it leaves you in a constant state of anxiety.
Constantly.
All the time, yeah. So I mean, I'll give my contact details to you. You can put that on Facebook or on the Blackhouse website or anything. But I'd love to chat to anyone who's African, currently living in social housing or in the private rental sector. And we'll just have a chat, get to know each other first, and then we can do formal interviews later. I don't want to get straight into the interviews, so I want people to, again, understand why I'm doing this, who I am, what I'm about, and I want to hear you talk. I want to hear your stories. That's what the most important thing is to me. I got 2 ears to listen, so... Yeah,
and I guess it's just getting to know people and know where you can find the people, and people getting comfortable with you, because like Kossam said, you know, we do become very suspicious of one another, and And I think that, well, this is just my opinion, it's like, if you've been here long enough, it's like, come on guys, we just got to start telling the truth about what's happening, and just being straight up about
just
it.
helping each other too.
Helping each other out, If we don't start helping each other out, we're going to continue to have a very difficult time.
I do think as a broad African community, we have a lot to offer. We
Yeah.
have to offer ourselves, a lot to offer each other. And I really think that, this to me, the research is just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's one piece of the puzzle, and I want people, to chat to me. I'll do as much as I can to honour their voices.
Yeah.
And that's just one piece of the puzzle to make things better. With people running for council, Ibrahim in politics at the moment, these are all attempts and steps that we are making as a community to do better for ourselves.
And what I'd really like to do is have you come back and keep talking about what's going on with the research and how it's progressing.
Yeah.
And
very jumbled at the moment.
I would imagine that everything on that Wero project would be pretty much all over, because it sounds pretty groundbreaking. Like, I haven't heard of anything being so deliberate and so immense as what this Wero project in all these different areas in our society.
That's very much the aim, the setup of it. Obviously, we think that it was set up in response to the March 15 Christchurch attacks.
Right.
But we'll treat it as if we're going to change the world. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a brilliant project to be on. And I hope people in the community just, come out and talk to you, or you get to them and talk to them. But anyway, we're coming up to our time to come off the air. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And we'll see you here again soon.
Yeah, most likely.
Hopefully,
always
maybe
around.
talking on some other subject.
Yeah, we'll do something a little less intense.
A little less intense. I actually like these really. I love these intense conversations, because we haven't had enough of them. I think we could be exploring it a lot more.
Yeah. I'm always down for intense conversations. Half of what I do with my time is just read intense stuff and think and not know what the heck I'm doing and think about it more. That's all I do. So if you want to have a chat about this stuff, I'm always down.
Cool. That's us on the Blackhouse.
Cool. Thank you.
We'll see you next week.